The first step to getting what you want is knowing what you want. This is something that all too often gets overlooked, and all too often it's assumed that we already have this. How many motivational posters tell you things like, go after the one thing that makes you truly happy, or never give up on your dreams? That's all good and well if you've always wanted to open your own restaurant, or if you've always dreamed of having your own successful band. But what if you don't know what you want from life? What if you have lots of different interests that are all pulling you in different directions? What if you're like my friend who's a pilot and has always dreamed of flying long haul but has a family back home who he'd never get to see? In these cases, telling someone to seize the day and live their dreams just isn't all that helpful. What you need to do then is to prioritize and look for the things that you can get from life that will make you happiest and tick the most boxes. Let's look at some of the ways that you can do that. And the first thing to do is to look for common themes. Now, very often, what this comes down to is identifying the commonalities in your dreams and objectives. In other words, if you want to be 20 things, then what do those 20 things have in common? If you want to be an actor and you'd love to be a rock star, then what is it about both those things that makes them appealing? What does being a rock star have in common with being an actor? The most likely answer is that both put you in the public eye, both are a kind of performance, and both bring a fair amount of wealth. So long as you can tick all those boxes, you should be happy whatever you do. Another way to get to the bottom of what it is that you really want and to discover why you want it is to use the 5 whys technique. Here you ask yourself the question why 5 times in a row in order to dig deeper and deeper into your motivations. So, let's say you want to be a famous novelist. Why? Because you want to create something that you can be proud of. Why? Because you want to leave some kind of lasting mark. Why? Because you respect and admire creative individuals who've done the same. Why? Because they can make a living by entertaining using only their imagination and their writing skills. Why does that appeal? Because you love to be creative and to be acknowledged for that creativity. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. What you've learned is that perhaps it's not being a novelist specifically that appeals so much as being able to be creative and to get credit for that creativity. This opens up a huge selection of different potential career options. You could now be a comic writer. You could be an artist. You could work at a creative design agency. You can get what you want in a different way. Likewise, if you still dream of being an astronaut, then you might find that it's actually a sense of discovery and pioneering that appeals to you. Being a researcher can actually bring about this same buzz and excitement, even though you're sitting right down here on Earth. Ultimately, you're still being the first person to discover something exciting. Another way to find out what it is you really want is to look at your role models and to see what it is about them that you admire. What parts of their lives would you like to emulate? Again, what do they have in common? Another tip is to look back at what you wanted to be when you were younger. Sometimes this will have no bearing, we can change an awful lot in a few decades. But in other cases, you'll find that whatever it is that you wanted to be back then still has some kind of appeal for you. Back then, you likely dreamed of being something much more ambitious and less realistic because the cynicism of adulthood had yet to sink in. Does that same thing still excite you now, though? Once again, you can then start thinking about what it is about that thing that appeals to you and how you could realistically achieve the same end. For example, if you couldn't make it as a football player, perhaps you've got what it takes to be a coach. You're still involved in football, just in a different way. Of course, this can all still be tricky. Even once you start to uncover the root of what it is that drives you, you can still find yourself struggling to make a choice and to decide on one course of action. Another thing that can really help then is to simply think about what your objectives will actually mean in real terms. At the moment, we've been focusing somewhat on career paths, and we'll stick with that for the moment. The thing to recognize here, though, is that the career path you think might bring you the most satisfaction and sense of accomplishment may not be the one that actually leads to you being happy. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, consider for the moment the idea of being a high flying executive with a huge corporation. This is an idea that a lot of people find very appealing until they actually live that life. Here's the thing, being an executive of a high flying business means constantly getting phone calls during your home life, working late hours, and dealing with highly stressful clients. The actual lifestyle will only appeal to a certain type of person. And this is where the concept of lifestyle design comes in. We'll talk about this more in future videos, but suffice to say, lifestyle design means choosing a job to suit the lifestyle that you really want, rather than choosing a lifestyle to fit around your job. Want to work fewer hours? Then don't become a CEO. Again, think about what it is about being a CEO that appeals, and then mimic that without changing your lifestyle. Now, there are plenty of ways you can do this. For example, it might be the idea of wearing a suit and feeling important that appeals to you. Both things you can achieve in other ways that don't require such a big commitment. So don't just think about what you think will make you happy. Actually imagine the day-to-day result of achieving your goals and whether that makes you happy too. If you're having difficulty defining the kinds of lifestyles and things that make you truly happy, then another option is to think about the times in recent memory that you were the happiest. If you can think back to the last time you felt really great, this may well be a good way to identify the kinds of situations and lifestyles that make you happy. Another consideration is what you want to achieve and what you want to be remembered for. And there's another mental exercise that you can use to work this out, which is to try writing your own eulogy. Sounds a little morbid, right? Well, actually, it can be a great way to remind yourself what's really important and to get your priorities straight. The idea is that you write your own eulogy as though it were being written by someone else. However, you're writing it in an alternative universe where your life panned out exactly the way you wanted it. What do you want the speech to say about you? How do you want to be remembered? Some people will want their eulogy to focus on how they were a great family man or woman. Other people will want to be remembered for their great works. What's going into your speech? What really matters to you? As mentioned, we've been focusing a lot on careers at this point, but that's only really a small part of getting what you want out of life. At the same time, you also need to think about things like your health and fitness, your family life, travel, your confidence. There's a lot that makes up a happy and healthy individual. Classically, you could relate this to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, a psychological theory that looks at all the things humans require to be happy. This includes the following: physiological needs, safety, love and belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. So at the bottom of these needs you have things like food, sex, safety, shelter. In the middle you have love, belonging, and self-confidence. And at the top you have self-actualization, which relates to your accomplishments and your ability to feel as though you're contributing something, creating something, doing something that matters. Now, this is an old theory and a somewhat arbitrary theory, but generally it's true that you need to satisfy both some basic needs and some larger goals in order to be truly happy. But you can't change all these things at once. You aren't going to become a world-famous athlete overnight while at the same time fixing your wardrobe and your self-esteem. Likewise, focusing on any career at the same time as developing a successful love life is going to be harder than just doing one of those things on their own. So in other words, the point is that you need to prioritize what you want out of life, and you need to focus on one aspect of your lifestyle to begin with. This means looking at what's most important, of course, but it also means looking at what will allow you to get the quick win. In other words, how can you very quickly start making a difference? As we'll see later on, this is very important. Making some kind of change that impacts you in a real way is important because it will give you that positive feedback which encourages you to carry on making more changes and developing your life further. Look for something that has the best balance of being quick and relatively easy to change, but also being impactful on your life in a big and meaningful way. All this will take some time, so don't rush it. Sit down with a piece of paper and a pen and hash out what you want from life, what makes you happy, and what you can realistically change relatively easily about your current situation. Now, once you have that thing, act.